All right, ready to dive in? Today we're tackling two things I know you're super curious about.
Yep.
How to get that laser focus, really hone it in and the whole psychology behind money.
Sounds good to me.
And to help us crack the code, we've got two awesome books. Hyperfocus. It's called Hyperfocus, How to Manage Your Attention in a World of Distraction. That's a mouthful. And then The Psychology of Money. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with these.
Yeah, I think these books are really interesting because they highlight that soft skills can be just as important as technical skills when it comes to things like productivity and finance.
Like, it's not just about knowing the stuff, it's about how you actually use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's start with Hyperfocus. It paints this really vivid picture right at the beginning. You're in a busy restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're sitting there, and it perfectly captures what it feels like to be alive today with just all this information coming at us all the time.
It's like the author was watching you try to focus on a Tuesday afternoon. There are two kids glued to their phones. A couple's having a deep conversation. Someone's trying to read the menu and listen to their friend, and there's like a catchy pop song playing. It's a lot.
Yeah, and the book's saying this isn't just annoying, right? Like, it's actually kind of messing with how our brains are wired.
Yeah, our brains, they evolved to keep us alive, not to do knowledge work. So if you think about it, way back in the day, being super alert, noticing every little thing could save you from a predator.
Right.
So now when we get a text or an email or whatever pops up on our phones, it feels like, oh my gosh, got to check it right away.
Like it's a life or death situation.
Exactly. It's like fight or flight kicks in.
Yeah.
So yeah, no wonder focusing can feel like a constant uphill battle.
So how do we win this attention war? I'm asking for a friend.
Well, Hyperfocus has some surprisingly simple strategies, and you can actually start using them right away.
I'm all ears.
One that really stuck with me is this idea of a distractions list. It's pretty simple. Whenever you get distracted, just write it down. Like, you're working on something and you suddenly remember you need to buy milk, just jot it down. Or if you're dying to check social media, write it down. Just get it out of your head.
It's like giving those distractions a place to chill out so they're not clogging up your mental bandwidth.
Exactly. And the book also suggests something else that's interesting. We should treat everything we consume, books, podcasts, shows, you name it, as if it's pitching us. Like they're trying to win our attention.
Okay, so before I binge that new show everyone's raving about, I should pause and ask myself, is this really worth my time, or am I just being sucked in?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about being mindful and choosing where you direct your attention. And then there's the power of present moment focus.
Oh, that sounds very zen.
It's just about noticing what's happening in your mind. The thoughts, the feelings, without judging them.
Just observing.
Yeah. Even a few moments of that can make a difference.
So we've talked about managing distractions, but how do we actually figure out what to focus on?
Yeah, well, the book talks about most consequential tasks. The author calls them MCTs. And MCTs are the things that actually matter, the things that align with your big goals.
Like the tasks that actually move the needle.
Exactly. To help you identify those, the book recommends something called the Rule of Three.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Every morning, you pick just 3 intentions or tasks that you really want to accomplish that day. That's it.
I like that. It's like a super minimalist to-do list. It forces you to prioritize.
Yeah, and then once you've got your 3 things, you enter the hyperfocus cycle.
The hyperfocus cycle. Sounds intense.
Well, it is about intense focus, but the way you do it is actually pretty simple. You use a timer and work in these focus bursts.
Okay, so we're getting tactical now.
A little bit, yeah. Basically, you set a timer for like 25 minutes usually, and you work on only one task during that time with 0 distractions. When the timer goes off, you take a short break and repeat. The key is to really eliminate distractions during those focus sessions.
Phone on airplane mode, notifications silenced, maybe even a website blocker if you need to. Hyperfocus really stresses that pre-planning to eliminate distractions.
Yeah, and there's a whole section on managing email because, well, let's be honest, that's where a lot of us get sucked in and lose hours.
My inbox is my nemesis.
The book suggests only checking email at specific times during the day instead of constantly refreshing your inbox.
So reclaiming control instead of letting tech control you.
Exactly. Now, here's where things get a little counterintuitive. Hyperfocus also says we should embrace a slower, more intentional work pace.
Wait, slow down to get more done. How does that work?
Yeah, it sounds kind of strange, but if you think about it, when we're rushing to be efficient, we often sacrifice quality and depth of thinking. And that's where scatter focus comes in.
Scatter focus, so the opposite of hyperfocus.
In a way, it's about letting your mind wander. But it's not about zoning out in front of the TV. It's about engaging in activities that allow your mind to make connections and generate new ideas.
Okay, I'm listening.
The book uses this analogy of our brains being like collectors of dots. We collect these dots of information through reading, observing, experiencing things. Scatter focus helps us connect those seemingly random dots in ways we wouldn't expect.
So that's how we get those aha moments of insight and creativity.
You got it. Things like going for a walk, daydreaming, even taking a shower can actually be super productive.
So it's about making space for those unconscious processes to work their magic. I'm totally with you on that. Some of my best ideas hit me when I'm not even trying to solve a problem, like when I'm walking my dog or washing the dishes. It's when things click.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've already tapped into the power of scatter focus. The key is to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
It's not the same as mindless scrolling or just getting distracted.
So hyperfocus to tackle those big tasks and then scatter focus to spark creativity, that's a pretty powerful combo.
It is. And you know what? It actually reminds me of the psychology of money. Might seem like a totally different topic, but there are some interesting parallels.
Okay, I'm ready for the money talk. What's the biggest takeaway from that book?
It really challenges our assumptions about financial success. Forget all that stuff about needing to be a genius with investments or knowing all the ins and outs of the stock market.
So you're saying I don't need an MBA to be good with money? Phew.
It's actually more about how we behave with money, our emotions, our biases, our past experiences.
So it's less about spreadsheets and more about psychology.
Exactly. And the book tells these two contrasting stories to really drive the point home.
Oh, I love a good story. Hit me.
So there's Ronald Reed. He was a janitor who quietly built an $8 million fortune by investing consistently over like 75 years. And then there's this guy, Richard Fuscone, a hotshot tech exec, literally threw thousands of dollars in gold coins into the ocean, just because he could.
Wait, what? Okay. That's wild. It's crazy that someone with a really simple approach could end up wealthier than a high-powered executive. Makes you wonder what we're all doing wrong, right?
It does. And that's because, as the book explains, money is deeply tied to our emotions and our personal experiences. Like how we feel about money shapes our decisions more than any financial model ever could.
So it's about our individual money story.
Exactly. And those stories are often shaped by events like growing up during a recession or experiencing a market crash firsthand.
Or even just watching how your parents handled money.
Absolutely. Everyone brings different baggage to the table when it comes to money. The book gives this example of how people born in different decades might have totally different views on risk and reward based on what they've seen happen in the stock market.
Totally. Someone who came of age during the dot-com boom will see things differently than someone who lived through the Great Recession.
Exactly. And it makes personal finance advice so tricky because what feels like a no-brainer to one person could be terrifying to another.
Yeah, and so much of the financial advice out there assumes we're all starting from the same place, which is just not true.
And that's exactly why understanding the psychology of money is so crucial. It helps us understand our own behaviors and make better decisions.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of that?
Well, the psychology of money has some thought-provoking answers. One that really stuck with me is the importance of defining enough.
Enough. In a world where everyone's always striving for more and more, that's radical.
It does sound a bit crazy, Reese. But the book says getting clear on what enough means to you can be a total game changer.
I'm curious.
There's this great story in the book about John Bogle. He founded Vanguard, the investment company. He's having dinner with Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller, these famous authors.
Okay.
Their host was a billionaire, and Vonnegut points out to Heller that this guy probably makes more in a day than Heller made from his book Catch-22 over its entire lifetime. And Heller's response.
What did he say?
He said, yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It's a good reminder that true wealth isn't about having the most, but about being content with what you have.
And the book uses some cautionary tales to show what happens when people never feel like they have enough. Like it talks about people like Rajat Gupta, the Goldman Sachs insider trader, and Bernie Madoff. They both achieved massive success and wealth, but were driven by this constant need for more. It ultimately led to their downfall.
It's scary how greed can be so destructive, even for people who seem to have it all.
Yeah, for sure. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about a concept that gets thrown around a lot, compounding.
Oh yeah, compounding. Everyone's talking about it these days. It's like the magic formula for wealth.
But the psychology of money? really challenges the hype around compounding. It uses the example of Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all time.
If anyone understands compounding, it's got to be Buffett.
Right. But the book argues that the real secret to his success isn't some brilliant investing strategy, it's time. He's been consistently investing for over 75 years.
So it's not about getting rich quick, it's about steadily growing your wealth over the long term.
Exactly. The book even compares Buffett's returns to Jim Simons, who runs a super successful hedge fund. Simons actually has much higher average annual returns than Buffett, but his wealth isn't nearly as massive.
Because he started investing later in life.
Exactly. Even though his returns were higher, he didn't have as much time for compounding to work its magic. Time, not necessarily massive returns, is the key ingredient in compounding.
That's a really important point because it shifts the focus from chasing those short-term wins to playing the long game.
It does. And this brings us to another important idea that ties back to both hyperfocus and the psychology of money, the importance of room for error.
Okay, tell me more about that.
It's kind of like building a bridge, you know? You wouldn't just design it for perfect weather conditions, right? You'd factor in things like wind, earthquakes, maybe even flocks of birds. You need that margin of safety.
So you're saying we should apply the same principle to our financial plans? Like, expect the unexpected.
Exactly. The psychology of money makes a strong case for building in a buffer. It's about recognizing that life is unpredictable and having a cushion to absorb those shocks without totally derailing your progress.
I'm starting to see how this connects back to hyperfocus. If we're constantly distracted and reacting to every little thing, it's going to be hard to think strategically about the long term, let alone plan for the unexpected.
Exactly. That's why those techniques for managing your attention are so powerful. They help you create the mental space to think clearly, assess risks, and make those intentional choices that set you up for long-term success.
This is making a lot of sense. Okay, let's dive into another concept from the psychology of money that I'm really curious about. Being wealthy versus being rich. Is there really a difference?
The book says there's a big difference. Being rich is about your current income, the money that's flowing in right now. But being wealthy is about having resources that provide financial security and freedom.
So someone driving a fancy car and living in a mansion might be rich, but they could also be drowning in debt.
Exactly. Wealth is more like an iceberg. The real size and strength are hidden beneath the surface.
That's a great analogy. So if it's not just about how much you earn, how do you actually build wealth?
The book argues that it has more to do with your savings rate than your income level.
It's not what you make, it's what you keep.
You got it. And here's where it gets really interesting. The book claims that the key to boosting your savings isn't necessarily earning more money, but increasing your humility.
Wait, humility and saving money, how are those two connected?
Well, a lot of our spending is driven by ego. We buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like.
Oh, the keeping up with the Joneses track. I know that one all too well.
Right. But the book argues that people who build lasting wealth tend to be less concerned with what others think about their spending. They're comfortable living below their means.
So it's about having the self-awareness to resist that urge to inflate your lifestyle.
Exactly. It also ties into having a clear purpose for your saving. Saving just for the sake of saving can be tough. But if you're saving for something specific, it becomes much easier.
Like saving for a down payment on a house or a dream vacation or early retirement.
Exactly. Having a goal in mind makes saving more tangible.
It's like having a destination when you set out on a journey.
Exactly. But the book also points out that saving has psychological benefits that go beyond those specific goals.
What do you mean?
Think about the security and peace of mind that comes from having a financial cushion. It's knowing you can handle unexpected expenses.
Honestly, that peace of mind is priceless.
It is. And then there's the freedom that comes from having options. Savings give you flexibility.
You could change careers, start a business, or even retire early.
Exactly. It's about having the power to shape your life.
And that sounds like true wealth to me.
It is. But let's be real. Saving can be tough, especially with all the messages we get telling us to spend, spend, spend.
It's a constant battle against temptation.
The psychology of money offers some practical tips to stay on track. One is to automate your savings. Set up automatic transfers so you're consistently putting money aside without even thinking about it.
Like paying yourself first.
Exactly. The book also suggests reframing how you think about saving. Instead of viewing it as deprivation, think of it as delayed gratification.
You're investing in your future self.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something that often gets a bad rap.
Risk.
Ooh, Yeah, risk. It can be scary.
The Psychology of Money argues that instead of fearing risk, we should embrace it.
Wait, embrace risk. Isn't that a bit reckless?
Not necessarily. It's not about taking foolish or unnecessary risks. It's about understanding that risk is a part of life, especially with finances.
Okay, I'm listening.
Remember Jesse Livermore, the guy who made a killing during the 1929 market crash? He was a master of risk-taking.
But didn't he eventually lose everything and take his own life?
He did, and that's a reminder about the dangers of uncontrolled risk. But the book's point is that taking calculated risks can lead to big rewards. So it's about finding that sweet spot, embracing risk but managing it responsibly.
Exactly. The book emphasizes diversifying investments and investing for the long term. It's about riding out the ups and downs of the market.
So patience and discipline are key.
Absolutely. And remember the idea of room for error. That applies to risk management too.
So having a buffer to protect yourself, even in the world of investing.
Right. Whether it's a bigger emergency fund, being careful with debt, or even choosing a more stable career path.
It's about acknowledging that life throws curveballs and being prepared.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears and talk about something that can be a real buzzkill. Pessimism.
Oh, yeah, pessimism. It's so easy to get sucked into that negative spiral, especially with money.
The Psychology of Money digs into why we're so drawn to negative outlooks.
It's like we're hardwired for it.
Part of it is that negativity bias we talked about. It's that ancient instinct to focus on what could go wrong. Like our brains are still in survival mode, scanning for threats.
So even though we're statistically safer and better off than ever before, our brains are still looking for danger.
Exactly. Think about it. You get a dozen compliments and one criticism. Which one sticks with you?
Oh, definitely the criticism.
That's negativity bias. And the book argues that this bias, combined with the media's focus on bad news, can really distort our view of reality.
So how do we break free from this negativity trap? How do we cultivate a more hopeful outlook, especially when it comes to our finances?
The book has a few suggestions. One is to become aware of our negativity bias and actively seek out positive information.
So it's about being more intentional with what we consume. Instead of mindlessly scrolling through social media or clicking on those scary headlines, we should seek out things that inspire us.
Exactly. Read books, listen to podcasts, have conversations that uplift and remind you of the good in the world.
I love that. It's like curating a more hopeful and empowering information diet.
Another powerful practice is gratitude. Taking time each day to appreciate the good things in your life, both big and small.
It's like that saying, what you focus on expands. If you focus on what you lack, you're going to feel more deprived. But if you focus on what you have, you'll feel more content.
Precisely. And this brings us back to hyperfocus and managing our attention. Remember, if we're constantly distracted, it's going to be really hard to cultivate a more optimistic outlook.
It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand. You need a solid foundation.
Exactly. Those strategies from hyperfocus, keeping a distractions list, being mindful, working in focus bursts, those can help you shift your mindset.
It's about taking control of your attention so you can choose where you direct your energy.
And that can have a huge impact on your financial decisions. When you're more present and less reactive, you're less likely to make impulsive choices you'll regret later.
It's about making financial decisions from a place of clarity and intentionality, not from fear.
The Psychology of Money acknowledges that there are real challenges in the world, but it argues that a balanced perspective recognizing both the good and the bad is more empowering than just giving in to pessimism.
So it's not about ignoring the problems, but approaching them with hope and a sense of agency.
Exactly. It's always darkest before the dawn. Even in tough times, there's always hope and the possibility of a brighter future.
And that leads to one of the book's most important messages, taking action. It's not enough to just think positive thoughts. We have to act on our beliefs.
We all have the power to make a difference.
All right, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's one small change you could make in your life based on what we've talked about today to manage your focus and finances better?
I'm going to be more intentional about scatter focus. I'm going to schedule time for it. Those moments of intentional mind wandering have been so valuable for me. How about you?
I'm recommitting to the rule of 3, choosing just 3 key tasks each day. It'll help me focus on what really matters.
I think those are both fantastic takeaways. Remember, even small changes made consistently can have a huge impact over time.
That's the perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with this one.
And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others find the podcast. Be sure to connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what you've taken away from this episode. Until next time, keep diving.
See? It's like building a bridge, you know? You wouldn't just design it for like perfect weather conditions, right? You'd factor in things like strong winds, earthquakes, maybe even the occasional flock of birds, you know? You'd need that extra margin of safety.
So you're saying we should approach our financial plans with the same mindset. Expect the unexpected.
That's the idea. The psychology of money really stresses the importance of building in a buffer. It's about recognizing that life, throws curveballs and having that cushion to absorb the shocks without completely derailing your progress.
I see how this ties back to hyperfocus. If we're always distracted and reacting to every little notification, it's going to be hard to think strategically about the long term, let alone plan for those unexpected events.
Right. That's why those techniques for managing your attention are so important. They help you clear your head, assess risks, and make intentional choices that set you up for success down the road.
This is really resonating with me. Okay, let's dive into another concept from the psychology of money that I've been thinking about a lot. This idea of being wealthy versus being rich. Is there really a difference?
The book makes a really clear distinction between the two. Being rich, it says, is about your current income, the money that's flowing in right now. But being wealthy is about what you don't see. It's about having resources that provide financial security and freedom, even if you're not, flashing it around.
So someone driving a fancy car and living in a big house might be rich, but they could also be drowning in debt.
Exactly. Wealth is more like an iceberg. The real size and strength are hidden beneath the surface.
I love that analogy. So if wealth isn't just about how much you earn, how do you actually build it?
The book says it has more to do with your savings rate than your income level.
It's not what you make, it's what you keep.
Exactly. And this is where things get interesting. The book makes this kind of bold claim that the key to boosting your savings isn't necessarily earning more money, but increasing your humility.
Okay, now that's interesting. Humility and saving money, how are those connected?
Well, think about it. So much of our spending is driven by ego, trying to impress other people. We buy stuff we don't need to impress people we don't even like. It's that whole keeping up with the Joneses thing.
Oh, I know that trap all too well.
But the book argues that the people who build real lasting wealth, they're not so worried about what other people think. They're comfortable living below their means and prioritizing financial security over appearances.
So it's about having the self-awareness to resist that urge to, inflate your lifestyle.
Exactly. And this ties into having a clear purpose for saving. Saving just for the sake of saving can be tough. But if you're saving for something specific, like something that really motivates you, it's a lot easier.
Like saving for a down payment on a house or a dream vacation or early retirement.
Exactly. Having a goal in mind makes saving more real and less like a sacrifice.
It's like having a destination on a map.
Right. But the book also points out that saving has psychological benefits that go beyond those specific goals.
Like what?
Well, only think about that feeling of security and peace of mind that comes with knowing you have a financial cushion. It's knowing you can handle those unexpected expenses.
Honestly, that peace of mind is priceless.
It is. And then there's the freedom that comes with having options. Like having savings gives you the flexibility to maybe change careers or even start a business.
You could retire early if you wanted to.
Exactly. It's about having the power to make choices and shape your own life.
Now that's what I call true wealth.
Right. But let's be real. Saving can be tough. It's especially hard with all the messages we get telling us to spend, spend, spend.
It's a constant battle.
But the psychology of money has some good tips for staying on track. One is to automate your savings. Set up automatic transfers to your savings account so you're consistently putting money aside without even thinking about it.
It's like paying yourself first before you even have a chance to spend it.
Exactly. The book also talks about reframing how you think about saving. Instead of viewing it as deprivation, think of it as delayed gratification.
So you're making choices today to create a better future for yourself.
Exactly. Investing in your future self. Now let's talk about risk for a minute.
Ooh, risk. Always a bit scary, right?
Right. But the psychology of money argues that instead of fearing risk, we should learn to embrace it.
Wait, embrace risk. That sounds a little reckless, doesn't it?
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It's not about taking foolish or unnecessary risks. It's more about understanding that risk is just a part of life, especially when it comes to finances.
Oh, I'm curious. Explain.
Well, remember Jesse Livermore. the trader we talked about earlier, the one who made a fortune during the 1929 market crash.
Yeah.
He was a master at taking risks. He wasn't afraid to go against the crowd, even when it meant, going against conventional wisdom. And while his story is an extreme example, it shows that taking calculated risks can pay off big time.
But Livermore eventually lost his fortune, right, and ended up taking his own life.
He did. And that's a reminder that risk can be dangerous, especially if it's driven by greed or overconfidence. But the boy's point is that we need to find that balance. We need to be okay with taking risks, but we also need to manage them responsibly.
So finding that sweet spot between embracing risk and being smart about it.
Exactly. The book talks a lot about diversifying your investments and investing for the long term.
So riding out the ups and downs.
Yeah, and not panicking at the first sign of trouble.
So patience and discipline are key.
Absolutely. And remember the room for error idea we talked about earlier. That applies to risk management too.
So even when it comes to investing, it's good to have a buffer.
Right. Having a margin of safety, whether that's having a large emergency fund, being conservative with debt, or maybe choosing a career path that offers more stability and flexibility.
So it's about recognizing that life can be unpredictable and just being prepared.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about something that can be a real downer, especially when it comes to money. Pessimism.
Ooh, yeah, pessimism. It's like a black hole that sucks all the joy out of everything.
Right. And the psychology of money really digs into this. It explores why we're so drawn to those negative outlooks, even when statistically things tend to get better over time.
It's like we're hardwired to focus on the negative, even when things are actually pretty good.
Exactly. A lot of it goes back to our evolutionary history. Back in the day, being attuned to potential threats was crucial for survival.
Right. If our ancestors weren't on the lookout for danger, they probably wouldn't have lasted very long.
Exactly. So even though we're not facing the same kinds of threats today, those instincts are still with us.
It's like our brains are still stuck in survival mode.
And on top of that, we have negativity bias. That's our tendency to focus on and remember negative things more strongly than positive things.
It's like our brains are Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. Nothing sticks.
That's a great way to put it. And we see this negativity bias play out all the time when it comes to money. Like we're always worried about market crashes, even though history tells us that in the long run, the market tends to recover.
We're always bracing for the worst case scenario.
And the psychology of money adds another layer to this. It talks about the power of stories and how we're all influenced by the narratives we hear.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that confirm our existing beliefs.
So if we're already feeling anxious about the economy, we're more likely to believe a news story that predicts a recession than one that highlights positive economic indicators.
Exactly. We seek out information that reinforces our fears.
So how do we break free from this negativity trap? How do we cultivate a more balanced outlook?
The book offers a few strategies. One is to just become aware of our negativity bias. Once we recognize that we're doing it, we can start to look for more positive information, like intentionally seeking out good news.
So instead of just doom scrolling all day, we can make a conscious effort to expose ourselves to stories and perspectives that are uplifting.
Right. And another powerful practice is gratitude, taking time each day to appreciate the good things in your life, no matter how small. It can really help shift your focus away from scarcity and toward a sense of abundance.
It's like focusing on what you have instead of what you lack.
Exactly. And this brings us back to hyperfocus and that idea of being intentional about managing our attention. If we're constantly distracted, it's really hard to cultivate a positive or even just a balanced outlook.
It's like trying to build a house on a foundation that's constantly shifting.
Right. And that's why those strategies for improving focus, the distractions list, mindfulness, working in those focus bursts, those can be so helpful for shifting your mindset.
It's about taking control of your attention.
So you can choose where you direct your mental energy instead of constantly reacting to everything around you.
And that can have a huge impact on your financial decisions. When you're more present and less reactive, you're less likely to make those impulsive money choices, the ones you end up regretting later.
Right. And that brings us to another important point. The psychology of money acknowledges that there are real problems and injustices in the world. It doesn't shy away from that.
It's not about pretending everything is perfect.
Exactly. But the book argues that having a balanced perspective, one that recognizes both the good and the bad, is ultimately more empowering than getting stuck in a cycle of pessimism.
So it's about approaching challenges with hope and a sense of agency, like we have the power to make things better.
Right. It's like that saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. Even in the midst of difficult times, there's always hope and the possibility of a brighter future.
And that leads to one of the book's most important messages, the importance of taking action. It's not enough to just think positive thoughts. We have to actually do something.
Right. We all have the power to make a difference, both in our own lives and in the lives of others.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's one small change you could make in your life, based on what we've talked about today, to better manage your focus and finances?
I think I'm going to be more intentional about creating space for scatter focus. I'm going to actually schedule time for it. Those moments of intentional mind wandering have been so valuable for me. How about you?
I'm recommitting to the rule of 3, choosing just 3 key tasks to focus on each day. That'll help me stay on track and avoid getting lost in the weeds.
Those are both great takeaways. And remember, even small changes compounded over time can make a huge impact.
That's a great point. Okay, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive. We've explored a lot of insights from the psychology of money, from the importance of humility to the power of defining enough, to understanding the role of risk and luck in our financial lives.
We've also talked about the dangers of negativity bias and the importance of taking ownership of our financial decisions.
Stay tuned for our final part where we'll dive even deeper into this whole pessimism versus optimism thing, especially when it comes to money.
And we'll connect those insights back to those practical strategies from Hyperfocus and explore how you can use both books to start making positive changes in your life.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into hyperfocus and the psychology of money. And, as we've been talking, one theme keeps coming up for me. It's this tension between pessimism and optimism, especially when it comes to our finances. Like, how do we stay hopeful and motivated when it feels like the world is constantly throwing curveballs?
It's a real balancing act. On the one hand, things are objectively getting better. If you look at the data, most people are living longer, healthier, and more prosperous lives than ever before. But it's so easy to get caught up in the negativity, always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, and the psychology of money really dives into this, explaining why we're so drawn to that pessimistic outlook.
It's that negativity bias we've been talking about. It's like a built-in alarm system, always scanning for threats, even when we're statistically safer than ever before.
So it's not just that the news is always full of doom and gloom. It's that we're actually wired to pay more attention to it.
Exactly. Think about it. You hear 10 compliments and 1 criticism. Which one are you going to remember?
The criticism, hands down.
Exactly. That's negativity bias at work. And the book argues that this bias, combined with the media's tendency to focus on the negative, can create a really distorted view of reality.
So how do we break free from this negativity trap? How do we cultivate a more balanced and hopeful outlook, especially when it comes to money?
Well, the book suggests a few strategies. One is to simply become more aware of our negativity bias. Once we recognize it, we can start to consciously seek out positive information and perspectives.
So it's about being more mindful of the information we're consuming. Like, instead of just doom scrolling all day, we can make a conscious effort to expose ourselves to things that uplift and inspire us.
Exactly. Read books that make you feel hopeful, listen to podcasts that make you think differently, have conversations that remind you of the good in the world.
I love that. It's like curating a more positive and empowering information diet.
And another powerful practice is gratitude. Taking time each day to appreciate the good things in your life, no matter how small. It can really help shift your focus away from scarcity and toward a sense of abundance.
It's like that saying, what you focus on expands. If you're always focused on what you lack, you're going to feel more deprived. But if you focus on what you have, you'll feel more content and grateful.
Exactly. And this brings us back to hyperfocus and the importance of managing our attention. Remember, if we're constantly distracted and reactive, it's going to be much harder to cultivate a long-term perspective or a more balanced outlook.
It's like trying to build a house on quicksand. You need a solid foundation to create something stable and lasting.
And that's where those strategies for improving focus come in keeping a distractions list, practicing mindfulness, working in those focus bursts. Those techniques can be so helpful for shifting your mindset and creating the mental space to cultivate a more optimistic perspective.
It's about taking control of your attention so that you can choose where you direct your energy and focus instead of just being constantly pulled in a million different directions.
And that can make a huge difference in your financial decisions. When you're more present, more focused, and less reactive, you're less likely to make those impulsive money choices that you end up regretting later.
It's about making decisions from a place of clarity and intentionality, not from a place of fear or scarcity.
Right. Now, the psychology of money acknowledges that there are real challenges and injustices in the world. Having a positive attitude won't magically make those problems disappear. But the book argues that a balanced perspective, one that recognizes both the good and the bad, is ultimately more empowering than just giving in to pessimism.
So it's not about ignoring the problems, but about approaching them with a sense of hope and agency, like we have the power to make things better.
Exactly. It's always darkest before the dawn. Even in the midst of difficult times, there's always hope and the possibility of a brighter future. And that brings us to one of the most important messages from the psychology of money: the importance of taking action. It's not enough to just think positive thoughts. We have to actually do something.
We have to put those positive thoughts into action.
Exactly. We all have the power to make a difference, both in our own lives and in the lives of others.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these two amazing books, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge. What's one small change you can make in your life, based on everything we've talked about today, to better manage your focus and your finances?
I think I'm going to double down on creating space for that scatter focus. I'm even going to put it on my calendar, like a meeting with myself. Those moments of intentional mind wandering have been so valuable for me. What about you?
I'm recommitting to that rule of 3 from Hyperfocus. Choosing just 3 key tasks each day will help me stay focused on what truly matters. It's so easy to get bogged down in the busy work and lose sight of the big picture.
Those are both fantastic takeaways. And remember, even small changes, compounded over time, can make a huge impact.
That's a great reminder. Okay, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Hyperfocus and the psychology of money. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps other people find the podcast.
Yeah, and be sure to connect with us on social media. We love hearing from you.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, what resonated with you, what you're going to try.
Yeah, let's keep the conversation going.
Until next time, keep diving.